What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to the version 5.2 version trailer, Tapestry of Spirit and Flame. I'm very interested to see what this ends up being like, given that I am aware that we aren't getting the actual main Archon quest continuing here, but in spite of that, because I've really been enjoying the main story so far, as well as just the updates in general, even if there is a lot of voice actor stuff going on. One thing that intrigues me is with this thumbnail, we have Citlali and Auroron, which makes sense for the main story, but from my understanding, we're not getting Citlali this update, we're getting Chaska. But regardless, let's see what's in here. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and let's get into it.
We're a tribe of warriors. In ancient times, we were responsible for patrolling and defending all of
new
Napa.
area.
So Ochkon's still managing to sow discord, even after all these years.
If you want to resolve a conflict through dialogue, sometimes you need a third-party
The
facilitator.
gun! It's so
This time
goofy,
and
but I
place,
love it.
I'll bet the easiest person to find is...
Ooh, I like the vibe of this.
His spirit has gotten lost and can't find its way back to his body.
I just want to rescue someone,
Yeah.
and Granny won't let me.
500 years later, mystery surfaced
Capitano
again.
content!
I worry that we risk repeating the mistakes of the Cinder City.
As long as the soul is involved, I should be able to help.
That's a cool boss.
Be free!
Oh, Kenki.
Take me up!
Oh, weird. Morphing between bosses? Wonder how that works.
Time to say hello.
Oh, I guess if it's a void thing, that is a sort of established thing, but interesting that they make a boss out of it.
It's either your end or mine!
Ooh.
Before the final moment truly arrives, we must fight harder than ever.
Hell yeah. Okay, cool. So definitely this is a bit of a interlude section of the story, given that we're not getting a main story continuation, but we are getting this sort of interlude bringing us to some of these new locations. Seems like it's focusing on Auroron and Chaska in their own degrees. Capitano's involved, which I'm always happy for, but mainly speaking, it seems like this update is going to be about the new areas, exploring them, checking out the tribes there, as well as just Chaska and Auroron because they're the new characters. So to start off, we have the line where a tribe of warriors in ancient times we were responsible for patrolling and defending all of Natlan. Makes sense, lines up. That is very true to what we know of the tribes. And I believe this is specifically talking about the Flower Feather clan, which makes sense for them. I really like this structure. And then we have someone I don't recognize the voice of, presumably an NPC, saying, so Ochkon's still managing to sow discord even after all these years. Someone from the past showing back up to cause havoc. Makes sense for a little bit of story to go on with. Presumably this is connected to one of the tribe storylines, if I were to guess, but maybe it's part of the interlude. And as that line is being said, we get this moving in of Chaska. We get this interesting onomatopoeia of swoosh going by her. They haven't really done much like that before, so it's interesting to see. But we see her flying across, get her art. This panel of her art and info and stuff is done weirdly similarly to how they used to do version trailers, like at the very beginning. This very much gives me that vibe. We have her saying, if you want to resolve a conflict through dialogue, sometimes you need a third-party facilitator. Makes sense? As we know, she's essentially a diplomat. She clearly is willing to get her hands dirty and get into a fight if necessary, but she first thing is a diplomat, a third party you can reach out to deal with conflict. We get this cool paneling of her with her gun, as she says, at this time and place, I'll bet the easiest person to find is, serving as a natural transition to Auroron, as we just get some shots of the people of the Nightwind. Then we have Auroron moving towards an ominous cave, and we have Citlali speaking, saying, his spirit has gotten lost and can't find its way back to his body. That could be talking about Auroron, but I could actually see this being part of the people of the Nightwind tribal quest, and this potentially being why Auroron is involved is because someone is dealing with an issue of the spirit and the soul, and as we know through the story, he's very familiar with that kind of thing himself. I could see that, given that typically the tribe quest lines and the character quests tend to have the highlighted character not actually be the one that the conflict is about as much as it is they are the person solving the conflict because it relates to them in some way. We, similarly to how we did with Chaska, get a shot of Auroran's art, and then we get a line from Auroran as we see him crossing a bridge that is very in line with how he's been portraying himself so far, which is him saying, I just want to rescue someone and Granny won't let me. Very much this feels like a continuation of his yearning to finally do something, to have purpose, to save someone. Even if he's past the point of wanting to sacrifice himself or others for that purpose, he still is desperate to find that meaning in that purpose. But obviously, Citlali is still in a position where she thinks he's being too reckless, but I'd be curious to see what he's trying to do now. We get this interesting perspective shot from one of the Saurians, I forget what the ones for the Nightwind are called, but one of the Saurians from there, that then cuts to Auroran zooming out to get the full image of the Saurian here. And then we have showing off some of his abilities from the sky, shooting a charge shot, and then we have this interesting mural that seems like it's been painted over to obscure the face in this way, which is interesting to me. Seems like this place is underground, as we have Capitano's voice coming in, which makes me think that this is almost certainly related to the interlude rather than one of the tribe quest lines, as he says, 500 years later and it's resurfaced again. Perhaps this interlude will in some way involve us spending more time with Capitano, as after the events of the storyline so far, something from the past of Natlin and Capitano is unveiled. Because as we know, Capitano was around 500 years ago protecting Natlin. He likely has a lot of secrets and connections from that time that we don't know about. So based on just this alone, I would guess that something from all the way back then in his past within Natlin has resurfaced, and we're going to be able to explore that to some degree. I would really be happy if that ends up being the case. And in line with that, we have a shot of Capitano on a platform looking out to the ruined remnants of whatever this structure is, which is really interesting to me. I'm very curious to learn what this place is all about. We get a shot of a dragon, some more ruins, as we have these interesting sort of purplish smoke flame things just emanating from a few spots. Very much giving me Abyss vibes, but I'm not entirely sure given that Abyss seems to usually be more of a deep blue. But then we have a voice that isn't Capitano saying, I worry that we risk repeating the mistakes of Cinder City, which makes me think that perhaps this place is Cinder City, which was some city back 500 years ago, presumably that was destroyed either during or shortly after the Cataclysm, that, if I were to guess, is going to be the focus of the interlude, and Capitano will have a lot of history there. Perhaps that's where he was when he was defending Natlin during and after the Cataclysm. And then pretty much all the visuals going forward here are of this really interesting creature that I presume is a boss, and I presume is connected to the Abyss in similar ways to some of the new Abyss things we've seen that mimic other monsters, as it has that aesthetic and color scheme, while also, as we see in a moment here, seemingly taking on the forms of multiple different bosses at a time, which is interesting to me. I'd be curious to see how that's actually implemented. But another detail I'd like to acknowledge about it is this interesting aesthetic of this weird visual coming off of it that looks almost like branches of a tree, but then there's also interspersed in it all these little circles that almost look like eyes, which sort of just gives me the sense that this is some deep eldritch primordial thing. And in line with what I was saying previously about what presumably Auroran's place in the tribe storyline will be, is as such. As long as the soul is involved, I should be able to help. He's searching for a way to help people, and he learns about someone who has an issue related to the soul. So he, believing himself to be fairly knowledgeable about that, for fairly good reason, says, oh, I want to help. I should be able to help, so I will. Which is very fitting for him. If I were to define Auroran as a character, it's someone who is desperate to help others. And then it's at this point that we pretty much just spend most of this looking at this boss, showing off Chaska and Auroran in the process, as we get it turning into Magukenki, and then into the seahorse I forget the name of, and then in the very last bit here we get just some quick shots between a lot of other things, presumably from either the interlude or other parts of storylines that are in this update. We have something exploding in front of the Traveler and Paimon, and it's already mid-explosion when we see this, so we have no chance of figuring out what is exploding. We get the shot of Chaska falling out of the sky. Presumably she's gonna be fine, but it is suitably dramatic. sick. And then we get this line that really grabbed me when I heard it. An NPC with utter desperation in their voice saying, "It's either your end or mine," as we get a shot of a warrior alone, only to then have everything glitch and go to black and white as suddenly they're surrounded by abyss monsters and hilichurls. We get this really interesting shot of this like vertically down perspective following one of the Saurians as it goes just straight downward, which is really interesting. I'm really excited to see what the new Saurian gameplay is like. We get another shot of Capitano standing at the top of some steps in some grand room that seems to have some kind of potentially altar or something. I'm not entirely sure, but as we pull out from him there, he says, "Before the final moment truly arrives, we must fight harder than ever." Presumably talking about the fact that even in this brief moment of pause before the final fight, we can't let ourselves settle or become calm and complacent, as he knows very strongly from his past that if you don't finish the fight, you're doomed. And he's presumably trying to remind people, whether it's us, Mavika, someone else, of that fact, that we can't rest on our laurels in this moment of temporary peace. And as he says this, we have this big Saurian, maybe another boss, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't actually watched the actual main special program yet. I'm just going off of what I've heard. But we have this big Saurian shooting some weird light laser in what looks like maybe the Night Kingdom. It pans out into some weird orb as we just move through different spaces, and that's where we end with the version art. Interesting enough, something I didn't realize before, but this sort of divider between Sitlali and Auroron is of someone sat down with this energy coming off of them turning into fire and burning away that which is above them, which I'm very curious about. I wonder if perhaps that is getting at the idea of there being a person, either from the past or present, that we will learn about, if not meet in this storyline, whose very soul is ignited and burns away either him or something beyond him, the world itself, other people, I'm not entirely sure, but clearly this imagery of someone turning to flame is here, which is interesting to me. I'm curious to see what the exact context of that is. But either way, that's where they leave us. I'm very interested to see what this is going to be like. I'm really excited for new areas. I'm really excited for new Saurians. The characters seem cool. I really want to learn more about Capitano. It seems like we might. So even though the main story isn't finishing this version and we have to wait a little longer for that, I'm still very excited for this. But with that, there's not really much more for me to say. So feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment on your thoughts. I hope you all have a great day. Goodbye.